Welcome guys, today we're joined by Duncan Butler. Welcome Duncan.
Hi, nice to be here.
Alright, so we're going to have a look at what's known as BDD, which is Behavioural Driven Development.
Yeah, BDD, invented by a guy called Dan North, who was teaching test-driven development and discovered that the biggest problem that people had was actually just thinking about the first test they were going to write. So he came up with this process using a given when then syntax, which allowed people to think about the business process rather than the programming. So we tend to have features, so you could just talk about logging in, and you could do it using the given when then syntax. And this helped people to write their first tests.
Okay, so that sounds great, but I know a lot of software development teams that have tried BDD, and many of you will be familiar with the given when then phraseology that you just spoke about. However, getting these concepts out of the classroom into a real software development team can often be very painful.
It can, yes. It takes time. People are used to test-driven development where they think about a class. BDD, you're thinking about a process, and it's that's the big leap. When you think about a process, you can take it all the way through your software stack, from the inputs all the way down to virtually a database. And just like in TDD, you mock out the boundaries of your process, but it gives you a larger scale to work on, which makes it easier for refactoring, and you end up with fewer tests.
Right. That sounds great, but how about we have a look at how that's properly done in practice?
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. We're going to do it in Visual Studio 2015. New project. And we're going to choose a class library. And let's call it BDD Basket Demo.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the project creating.
Right, so we need to add the SpecFlow, NuGets,
NUnit,
and NUnit.
and something to run it, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, so let's search for SpecFlow. There we go. Latest stable version is 1.9.0. Let's go ahead and add that. Now we're going to add NUnit. Latest stable version 2.6.4. And to run it, we're going to use the NUnit test adapter. Latest stable version is 2. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add a SpecFlow feature file. So add new item. And then we're going to choose SpecFlow feature file. And today I believe we're going to do an example of a shopping basket.
Yeah.
So let's call this basket.
Basket or shopping basket, I don't mind, yeah. And it's a .feature file. Essentially this is just a text file. It's just pure English text. SpecFlow helpfully put some stuff in here for us which we are going to overwrite. The feature bit at the top is just a description, so you can edit this and...
Okay, so how about we say a simple shopping basket that we can add items and remove items from?
Sounds good.
Okay.
And then we got the this is the actual scenario.
We're down to the scenario. So what's the scenario, Duncan?
This is the actual testing bit itself. So you can see the given when then syntax there. So for us, we're going to create a new shopping basket. Now again, this is just English, so you can word this however you like. So it can be very, very businessy, or you can do it as a very, very programmatically if you like. You know, it's designed really to be read by anybody.
Okay, so how about we start off with a very simple scenario where we create an empty basket and it has nothing inside it, so it has no contents.
Good idea.
Okay, so for this one, I'm actually struggling to think of what to say for given here.
Well, we don't actually have to have given. Although it's a given when then syntax, it's just English. So if we haven't got a given, and in this case, I think probably starting with when makes sense, then we don't have to use the given or the and. Yeah, we can actually just go, when I create a new basket, then it has nothing.
That's good to know.
You can do the same. You can actually start it with given and then a then if you had a similar problem with a when part.
Okay, so how about when I create a new basket, and then we say the basket has no contents, it's empty.
Yep, yes, yeah, the basket is empty. Lovely. And there's our first scenario.
Okay, so now we've got our first feature, a basket contains no contents. Where do we go from here, basically? How do we drive development with this scenario?
Well, let's do the BDD thing. Oh, let's run the tests. Whoops. Let's run the test. So if we run the SpecFlow scenarios, it will build our project, which has actually nothing in it at the moment, and a runner will appear. Here we go. And there's our test. Basket has no contents. It will run it. And if we look down here, what's it actually telling us?
Test not run?
Yeah, it says test not run, message, no matching step definition found. And you'll notice it's given us some code.
Yeah, it's given us a code with an attribute giving us the English that we specified.
That's right. So what we do is we can copy this, and if we go into here, now I'll just quickly paste that code I've just copied in. And there's a whole load of rubbish at the top here which we don't really want. So we'll just get rid of that, because that's come from the test rig. And we're left with some code.
Great.
Now, this is what we call a step definition file, so we can actually rename this. You see it's called step definitions. So we could rename the file to step definitions or basket step definitions. It doesn't really matter. But what it does do is this is the bit that matches to our English. So we've got I create a new basket and the basket has no contents. So in here, we can start creating our basket. Which is what to do. So essentially we've led ourselves down the path of what we've got to do next. So we're saying so in good BDD way, a basket demo. So we're saying we're going to create a new basket. Now obviously the class for basket doesn't exist yet. And we could create a whole new project to put that into, or we can for the minute while we're demoing. Just nip down here and go public class basket. And then once we're ready to put that into a production piece of code, because this is our production code, we can move it into its proper namespace using a refactoring.
Sure. But don't we have to also complete the then here?
We can, yes. So we're saying here that it's a then. So that's a normal end unit type assertion. So you can go.
Do we have to add a list or something to be empty in our basket?
We will do. But really what I'm trying to do here is get the test to drive my code.
Sure.
So we needed a basket, so we created a basket. the next bit is, oh, hold on a second, we need a contents thing. So, yeah, we could come down here and do it that way round if you fancy, I don't mind. So we go public, so we want a list of something. I have no idea. We'll use object at the moment, I suppose, because we can, it depends on what our things are. That's cool. So yeah, but so let's go
I
and
think we're missing a reference.
yes, that's what's right. And it doesn't like contents. Oh, it doesn't like contents. Now it like contents. There we go.
Okay, so we've got our when and we've created our basket, but how are we going to make the then pass? How are we going to say that it's got no contents?
Well, interestingly, there's actually two things here. When you create the basket, this property is actually null. So you could go assert is null basket.contents.
Now that doesn't feel very natural to me. It doesn't feel very object oriented. I want the list to actually be empty rather than null.
Right. So in order to get to that point, I think what we have to do, so we want to say in here, let's actually say what we want. We're going to go and we want NUnit using NUnit framework. And have we got is empty?
Is empty, sounds good.
Stream message object 5 address. Yeah, let's try that one. Is empty.
And let's have a look at the overloads. One of them
One of
surely
them
would be a
must-
list.
Must be. We can't get hold of our basket, so we've just got to turn that into a field first, which is straightforward. In this case, in our very simple scenario, we can just create it as a field here. So if we go like then there's underscore basket dot contents. Now that will fail at the moment because basket.contents is null.
Yeah.
So in order to make it make sense, we need to have a constructor and
Okay, so now we have a constructor. Let's instantiate that list.
yeah, so we go contents equals new list of thing. Right. Now we're using objects at the moment. That's not what we'd use normally. Normally our item would be something we'd recognise. So it could be a product or a product ID you'd normally add to the basket, because the basket doesn't actually care about what the thing itself is. It's normally just a reference to a list of other things. So you'd probably store IDs in the basket rather than, IDs and quantities maybe.
Okay,
So-
so is that enough to make our test pass?
It should be, I think. Let's have a look. Oh,
Seems like we've missed a semicolon somewhere.
yes. too used to my own tooling.
Oh,
There we go.
looks like we have a passing test.
Yes.
Alright, great. So now we have got a passing test, but our basket doesn't do very much. It's just sitting there with no contents. How about we have a scenario for adding things to our basket, and then we can think about a scenario for removing things from our basket.
That sounds good.
Alright, let's go ahead. Alright, so let's add those features now. So our first scenario, it's going to be adding an item to the basket.
Yep.
So can't even spell scenario, it would seem. Let's use the tooling. Adding
An item to the basket.
Adding an item to the basket. So we'll say, given that I've created a basket.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you can do at this point is we can start to reuse previous steps. So you've got when I create a new basket. So really, SpecFlow is only using the text bit. I create a new basket to differentiate. If you look at our steps, so I create a new basket. We've written that already, so we don't have to worry.
So we won't have to create that step definition later. That's great. Let's say when let's say add an item to the basket.
Yeah.
Then what we're going to say here, let's say the basket contains the added item, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, now we've got a new scenario for adding an item.
Yes. Okay, I made a comment earlier on that we wouldn't have to rewrite that step. I actually forgot we're doing this in C# and not Ruby. And the Ruby SpecFlow, the C# SpecFlow code actually puts the when in here, so it's looking for the when.
So that's not going to match, is it?
No, but what we can do is we can say to it, do the same step for the given.
Right.
And now it will do both. If we go back to our SpecFlow feature, that's now gone. See how it's changed colour to say, oh, I know where this step is. It's always handy to know if you can look at the tooling to say, oh yes, I have that step.
It's handy to remember that colour change.
Yes. So we can actually reuse our steps. So we need to, if we run all our specs again, we'll have a not run test here, and again it will give us the code if we wanted to copy it.
So it's just giving us the code for
The
when
steps and the then.
Yes, because they're the only ones we haven't implemented.
Yes.
Okay, so let's copy that generated code
Okay, so
and paste it back into our project.
and that will give us, now you can order these however you fancy. I tend to order them by what they do. We'll leave it as it is for a minute. So there we are, there's our generated code. So the next bit of the scenario that we haven't actually covered yet is when add an item to the basket. So we need to be able to add something to the basket at this point.
Right, so we're going to need an add method, are we?
Yes. So our basket is going to need an add, and that add should take something. Item. Well,
So wait a minute, we need to define what our item is.
We do. Now, I am at this point, for demo purposes, I think we just use a new object for the minute. I think that will save us a lot of grief. So we're only going to add one item. We don't have to differentiate different items. So at this point, I think we can get away with object. If you were in a real world situation, this would probably be a thing.
Okay.
So it would be a product, or you'd have a product ID and all sorts of other interesting information about this thing, and you just add that to the item. So this item can represent anything, is what we're saying.
Right.
And
So
we've got,
let's go ahead and implement that add method. Okay, so let's go ahead and implement that add. So I guess all we're going to do is add that item to our list. So
yes. One of the things I found doing this sort of development is that although we're using very simple objects here, the actual processes tend to be really straightforward. There's a lot of other things we could do. We could have done to add an item to a basket. I did a whole lot of blog posts recently about using messaging to add items to a basket. So the basket actually never existed in its true sense. Like here, it was just a bunch of messages that got generated, that got picked up and regurgitated.
right.
And again, it was very simple code when you actually looked at it. It tends to, BDD tends to lead you down this keep it simple path.
Okay, so I've gone and added an assert for is not empty basket contents. Let's go ahead and try and run our test again. See if that was enough to make it pass. Oh, apparently we forgot another semicolon. Let's save that. Run all again. And that was enough to make our test pass. Okay, so now I'm going to create our third scenario, which is removing an item from the basket. So scenario, removing
Removing an item from the basket.
an item from the basket, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the given here is going to be the same as adding an item to the basket.
Yes. Yeah. In actual fact, we're going to.
In fact, you're right, we can basically copy again given and when from the previous scenario.
Yeah, but the when is going to have to become an and, because you want to add an item. No, the when becomes the and.
Sure.
And then we can go when.
I remove an item from the
I'll
basket.
remove an item from the basket. And then the basket does not contain the item. Now, really, in our scenario at the moment, the basket is going to be empty, but this is more true to what it should be.
Okay, so we've added our new scenario, and I can see already that some of the lines are coloured or purple to indicate there's no steps.
So we need to create the steps, and again we're just going to run the
Test runner.
run the scenarios, just to see what it tells us. One of the joys of SpecFlow is the fact that it will just lead you down the path of you've got to do this next. If you just run the tests, if you ever get lost, just press run and see what happens.
Okay, it looks like we've got a not run test.
You've got a not run test. So it's saying, it's going, given I add an item to the basket. Now, this is this line here, which is the same as this line here. So I think if we go to our steps, and in our when, I add an item to the basket, if we copy that, and again, just quickly paste it in above, change the when to a given,
That's made it. Let's go back to our scenario and see
and we
if
go
that's
back to
made it work.
and if we go back to our scenario. So what we've seen here is and is actually an alias for given, when, or then. In
Right.
fact, yeah, you don't often see it used in the thens. We just tend to do a bunch of thens, or you can use and. But so it's just an alias for the step I'm in at the time.
Right.
So we've now got to just go when I remove an item from the basket. So again, quickly run the tests. And copy the steps that I want.
Okay, this time we want the when and the then.
Yeah. Because that's the only two we're missing now. So I'm just going to paste those straight in the bottom here. So when I remove an item from the basket, so again, we're going to need a remove. We had an add, so we're going to have a remove. So let's go basket dot remove. Typing the code that I wished existed, and we'll have item in there. So I'll remember to put a semicolon on this time. And we're just going to use object again because this is a demo.
And we can see that just the method's gone red now.
Yeah. So we can just get Visual Studio to generate us a stub down here. So we've got the add and there's remove. And the remove, so that's made that. So in here, we've got the basket does not contain the item. So we can actually nip up here and we can say, because we know we've only added one item at the moment, we can cheat a little bit and we can just copy that down there. Now, if we progress this forward, we would have to start to think about what an item is, and then we'd start figuring out how we could remove specific items and then check that they had been removed. And that's what this scenario do. But in this case, this will work for us and move us forward. And that's what BDD is all about. So if we go contents dot remove item.
Is that enough to make our test pass?
I think our test will fail in an interesting way at this point, because I think what we've done is, although it looks like it should work, it won't.
Okay, so that test has failed.
Yeah, it's failed because it says the basket isn't empty. What's actually happened is we've added an item up here. So we created a new item and added it, and then we created another new item and said remove it.
So it's not the same item we tried to remove.
They're both objects, but yes, they're right, they're not the same item. So what we need to do here is, I think we can get around this very, very quickly. If we go object up here, and we just have an underscore item. We can then come into here and we can say underscore item there, and add underscore item. Carry on down. We now don't want to create a new one in the remove. We want to remove the one we've added.
Okay.
And that should make everything happy.
Okay, great. So now we've got 3 passing tests and a basket which we can add and remove things to. So I guess that's it for our simple example shopping basket. And it couldn't do very much basically. It was simply a re-implementation of the C-hash list. However, I do feel we got over many of the concepts using BDD to drive our development process.
Yes, it was a trivial example, but the process for a more complex problem is exactly the same. We use the scenarios to drive the requirements of our code.
Alright, so that's it for our introduction to behavior-driven development, but we're going to try and expand out in this example in a new video in the coming weeks and make it a little bit more useful. Thanks for watching, guys.
See you again.